Hello everyone and welcome to today's DevPro Web seminar titled Taking Touch to the Next Level, Design and Tooling Considerations for the Natural User Interface. Today's web seminar is sponsored by DevExpress. Today's speakers are Tim Huckaby and Julian Bucknall. Tim is focused on the natural user interface, touch, gesture, and neural enriched client technologies like HTML5, Silverlight, WPF, and iOS on a broad spectrum of devices that include computers, tablets, the Surface, the Kinect, and mobile devices. Tim has been called a pioneer of the smart client revolution by the press. Tim has been awarded many times for the highest rated technical presentations and keynotes for Microsoft and many other technology conferences around the world. Tim is consistently rated in the top 10% of all speakers at these events. Tim has been on stage with and done numerous keynote demos for many Microsoft executives, including Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer. Tim founded InterKnowlogy experts in .NET and Microsoft platforms in 1999 and Actis Interactive Software in 2011, and has over 30 years of experience, including serving on a Microsoft product team as a development lead and an architecture team on a server product. Tim is a Microsoft Regional Director, a Microsoft MVP, and serves on many Microsoft's councils and boards like the Microsoft.NET Partner Advisory Council. Julian Bucknall is the Chief Technology Officer at DevExpress. He is responsible for technology vision for the company, identifying markets and platforms to investigate and support. As an experienced professional architect, designer, and developer, he's worked for a variety of businesses from nonprofits to the largest banks. He has a wide experience in implementing frameworks, libraries, and controls for many platforms. Okay, for today's Q&A, it is a chat-based Q&A, and it will begin when the session ends. But you can enter questions at any time. To ask a question, click the live chat button and type your question into the chat window. If you have a technical problem, please click the Help Center button at the top right of your screen. This session will be available on demand for 3 months starting tomorrow. Now I turn things over to Tim. Tim, take it away.
Hello and welcome. My name is Tim Huckaby, and today's presentation is called Taking Touch to the Next Level, Design and Tooling Considerations for the Natural User Interface. And I call it the Natural User Interface, often called NUI. This is my definition of the Natural User Interface. This is not Microsoft's definition. This is my definition. It's multi-touch capable. And it's also not just touching your hands on the computer. It's computer systems interacting with physical objects and virtual objects. And I'll show you a bit of that in a few minutes. But the natural user interface is also, now with Microsoft Kinect for Windows, is also gesture and voice capability in our computer systems. In other words, waving at computer systems and or speaking to them. And ultimately, within the next decade, we will have neural capable computer systems. Whether you consciously navigate a piece of software with your mind and or the software is monitoring what you're thinking, we are on the cusp of that within the next decade also, believe it or not. Anybody recognize this date? I don't expect you to recognize this date. I would have recognized this date, but as painful as it is for me, this is a moment in history when, well, let me just put it this way. I have been preaching in front of audiences, technical and non-technical, all over the world for the last 5 years about the natural user interface and touching computer systems. And as painful as this is, having worked for or with Microsoft for over 20 years, arguably close to 25 years, it wasn't until this guy walked on stage with that magical $800 device that touch became pervasive and a common way of using a computer system. It wasn't until this magical device made a browser experience acceptable for only using your fingers. Who would have thought that would have happened? You know, Microsoft has had an API for touch, a beautiful API for touch in .NET for years. Literally years. Way back to Windows Vista, we had touch-based API. And it's just got better and better, but it wasn't until this consumer device made it significantly into the market that now we use touch as a prevalent way to use computing systems. Now, let me show you an example of some touch-based software that runs on the Windows platform, that frankly has run on the Windows platform for a long time. I love this demo because it shows 3D and it's so powerful. And in fact, it's been around quite a long time. This was actually this is actually a part of a production application in some heart surgery centers in the Midwest. I am spinning in 3D. My hands are on the screen. I'm zooming in. I'm zooming out. This is just a documentation tool. What this does is a surgeon does a number of procedures, whether they be stents or lesions or some other type of procedure to the human heart, and it applies what they did in template form on top of a template. And a surgeon would typically annotate and say, hey, your artery looked like this, and I put a stent on there to prop it up. And they would annotate on this basis, and the annotations and what the surgeon did would go up to the cloud so that you could get to this data in a number of formats. But a surgeon is not typically parting on the outside of the heart, right? They're parting on the inside of the heart. So I'm going to turn the inside on, the outside off, and notice if we knew what we were looking for, you know, we can zoom in to an aorta or something like that. Is that not cool? This is just .NET. You know, we're using an anatomical image, a digital pre-rendered image, and wrapping our .NET 3D engine around it, which you can get on Codeplex. But this is just .NET, and it shows the power of touch. And again, you can't see my fingers; you're just seeing what's happening on the screen. But it shows the power of 3D and touch, and one of the many use cases that we can use for implementing 3D and multi-touch together. Now that was just WPF, and our next demo, or the next demo I'm going to do, is also just WPF. You ever heard of this television show? Don't admit it out loud, because it's one of the dumbest shows on TV. In fact, the AMA has wiped their hands clean of this one because they make so much stuff up. But staying on the heart theme, we did another WPF project for this particular television show, and I show it for a whimsical nature, and also to make the point that touch becomes prevalent because people see this stuff, like my wife and my 19-year-old daughter, on television, and they just assume that touch, between the iPad and things like this, that touch is a prevalent way to use computer systems, and that's paving the way for this newie thing. Alright, just 55 seconds. Watch closely.
Keep an eye on Carrie.
I'll resect both atria and build new ones out of bovine pericardium. And during reconstruction, Dr. Hunt will stay with Linda using a human donor aorta to prepare the vessels for reimplantation.
And all of this in just 4 hours.
We have to be fast. We all set?
Let's go.
All right, prep her and page me when she's ready. Christina? Are you excited?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. Good.
The fear going back in is worse than actually doing it. Just getting back on the horse is all it is.
Okay, that's just WPF. You may have noticed the Microsoft Surface device in the background. You also may have noticed an 84-inch multi-touch capable Windows 7 compatible Samsung monitor in the background. That's pretty powerful software for just a 50-second spot on television. But again, it shows the point that when the consumer, and you are not the consumer, the audience listening to this today, you are the developers and designers and IT people that are building solutions. You are not the consumer. But when consumers like my wife see this on TV, they just assume this is a prevalent way to do things. Okay, let's take it, to put this in context, let's take a look at one more look at the heart. I love this one because it includes a technology that is near and dear to me that I'm going to focus a little bit on today, in this presentation. It focuses on the Microsoft Kinect and the second and third parts of my definition of NUI, and that would be gesture and audio control. Notice InterKnowlogy engineer Shobon Kapaljek, he is demoing a prototype version of the 3D version of this heart. Hopefully this will make it to television this season. I think it will. Maybe another part of the human anatomy, but Shimon is showing how with relatively good fidelity he can manipulate the human heart with gesture. And you can't see it, and I'm not so sure it's even in this little video that I had him do. You can also audio control this, so you could say things like zoom in, zoom out, rotate right, rotate left, that type of stuff, which are going to be prevalent and legitimate ways to manipulate computer systems in the next 5 years. I think the Microsoft Kinect, and it surely will see some competition in a relatively short manner, will pave the way for people and computer systems for it to just become prevalent. It'll just you're in a mall or you're in an airport, and it will just be a prevalent way to use computer systems either in addition to touching or in place of touching, because in many cases, in many scenarios, especially public scenarios, there are things where you just don't want to touch anything, right? It might be unsafe to touch things. Okay, so I've been doing this for a long time. I'm certainly comfortable on stage and certainly comfortable talking to you today, and I especially am comfortable talking about my passion, the natural user interface. I have two companies I'm required to tell you that I work for. One is makes custom software. It's pretty well known for all this cool cutting edge stuff, counting NASA among its clients, but also small mom and pop shops and companies, large and small, from all over the world. It builds custom software on a service basis. The next part of my life is building kiosk and interactive digital signage solutions that are NUI based, and I'll show you a peek of that in a bit. Okay, enough about the uncomfortable about Tim slides. Hey, I started programming on these type of things, even systems before these type of things, and we clearly have come a long way. I was there when they told us that we had to take our right hand off the keyboard and grab this mouse thing. This happens to be the original mouse built originally by Xerox. I didn't get to use this particular mouse, but I remember those original IBM PCs where we had to lift our right hand off the keyboard, and I'm a machine gun on the typewriter, right, on a computer system. So it was the most unnatural thing in the world, and guess what? Now we don't even think of it. It's second nature to pull our right hand off the keyboard and grab for that mouse. It's also becoming second nature to touch computer systems like an iPad or some of the software I'm showing you today. It's becoming prevalent. It's becoming accepted and a norm in the industry. And I would argue that the same things are going to happen with gesture and voice over the next many years. But we're certainly in the touch revolution right now, and the multi-touch revolution. But touch has been around a long time. Believe it or not, our first touch screens came in 1972 in this Plato 4 type system, just single touch type stuff. And that, let's just assume the fidelity of touch was not that good, not even close to the performance we get from devices like the Samsung SUR40 for Microsoft Surface, or the iPad, or the Flat Frog device. If you've seen that multi-touch device, it has a magical fidelity of touch. And certainly now we have Windows 8 coming in its release candidate as I speak to you today. It's designed for touch on the get-go, as opposed to just Windows 7 being touch capable. What also is relatively new is how inexpensive this stuff is. We know this in the industry. Hardware just keeps getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and more powerful and powerful and powerful. And we have operating systems across the stack that are designed for multi-touch out of the get-go, like iOS and like Windows 8. And on the Microsoft platform, we've had a consistent, pretty awesome API for touch all the way across the .NET stack and now hitting the WinRT platform, which gives us incredible developer productivity for touch. The experts in hardware are telling us that we're going to get touch whether we like it or not in every new computing device in the short term. Every smartphone, every computer system, it's just cheaper to include it than to not include it as an option. And we are seeing that right now, certainly in the smartphone space, but we're going to start seeing it in our notebooks and tablets for sure. And I wanted to show you today, I showed you some 3D live, spinning that human heart. I have, the computer I'm using today is not God's gift to computing devices by any stretch. This thing probably is worth $200, and I can't wait to get a new computer because this is 2 years old, which makes it a dinosaur. Originally, this thing was $1,500. You can buy an equivalent HP TouchMart to this thing, which is much more powerful today, for just under $600. But you know, the point here is, let's assume this thing is going to be $200, and all these tablets we're hearing about for Windows 8 are going to be much more powerful than this computer in a tablet form factor with a battery life that goes 5 times as long. And you can see this thing rates in Windows pretty decently. At a 5.0, it did a darn good job with WPF 3D, I think you will argue. Another beautiful thing about our industry, and I have software engineering roots, so and I worked on the first successful Microsoft IIS servers on a product team a very long time ago, and at the time I swore that I would never learn HTML because it's just not a programming language, right? And in HTML's defense, we've contorted it to do things it was never designed to do. But I can tell you that HTML5 is the first elegant HTML-based markup language that has ever been around. You know, one would argue that XAML is very elegant and robust and rich, and it's also a markup language. But this is the first real version of HTML5 that you can actually program with a little JavaScript, of course, maybe a lot of it. But what I wanted to show you here is the HTML5 spec defines touch as a standard way to manipulate a browser-based application. That means we're going to have to start changing our web applications and our websites for touch capability. As HTML5 gets prevalent, you're going to start seeing that. We've just started to see it, a few touch-based or touch-designed HTML sites on the internet, and feel free to search in your favorite search engine with something like HTML5 Touch, and you'll see a lot of stuff appearing out there, and it will continue to get more and more prevalent. The other thing that is relatively new, the two things that we've kind of known but were proven because of the advances we've made in touch-based computer systems, is one, learning environments are the perfect way to do a touch-based application. In other words, if you make your software into a game, people learn dramatically better. The other one is if you build computer systems in combination with physical objects, people tend to engage a lot more deeply. In a retail scenario, they get upselled a lot easier. In this whimsical gaming example I'm going to show you here with another little video, you'll see that the experience is dramatically enhanced by humans interacting with computer systems, interacting with physical, and soon in the future, virtual objects. So let me play the highlights of this little video here, and I think it will resonate and really bring the point home. Okay, led by InterKnowlogy engineer Dan Hannon, we built this video in our R&D time to learn a particular part about the some advanced topics, I should say, in WPF. I'm just going to forward to the good stuff that relates to physical interaction here, and we'll watch about a minute of it, and I think this will resonate.
Roll again. A couple more things about what we did. We did an interesting gesture implementation here. So if I have my bed out here, let's just go bed up here on the 8. And as I place it down, hopefully you can see that, but there's a set of arrows on each side that let me, we call it the ratchet gesture, and so you can see my bet right next to it. I'm ratcheting it up or down, $100, $200, $500. So let's let it ride high, 500 bucks on 8. I can do the same thing anywhere else, ratchet it up, 200 bucks. I got a lot of cash to spend, so go ahead and spin some up there.
Yeah, I want.
There you go, 1,000.
I want a party.
Maximum 2,000 bet. You're draining your pocket. Let's give it a whirl here.
You are getting to the acrylic dice.
Yes.
My favorite part of this app.
Just added this in the last week. We got these cool acrylic dice. They're see-through. We got these from Microsoft. And you can't even tell on the camera, but they actually have a bite tag on each of the 6 faces. But what's really cool about it is the bite tag sticker is transparent, but they've got it set so the IR sensitivity, the infrared sensitivity on these tags is correct such that the cameras can recognize them. So instead of flicking with my finger, I'm going to roll these physical dice out here, and it's going to recognize the roll, represent it here just sort of for informational purposes, and go ahead and play the game like normal.
That is awesome.
Is that sweet?
That is so awesome. It really makes you speculate about the way user interfaces are going to be done, and beyond keyboard and touching, really using common objects.
Physical objects.
You can't even see. I mean, even holding this up to my face, I could barely see the object tag in there. That is very cool.
So that's a little subtle thing that I did in the rules where, so he picked up that dice, he put the other one down, and we're not counting that dice yet in the roll because I haven't re-rolled it, right? So.
Okay, is that not compelling or what? I just love that. Again, we have seen this time and time again where physical interaction with computing system actually enhances the user experience and the engagement when you use physical objects. Now, I mentioned this casually before. Windows 7 is touch capable, but if you've ever tried to touch the little red X to close a window, you know how difficult it is. Windows 8, and I'm not going to demo it here today, I assume you've seen it in its beta and release candidates views, is designed in the outset for touch. It's designed completely for touch. In other words, it uses big tiles. The Metro look and feel is designed for multi-touch. The tiles are big. There's even engineering in there that will intelligently select the little red X if you decide to go at it with your finger. Tiles is the key, though. It's also perfectly designed for gesture, which is what this device does. You ever heard of this thing? This is the world's fastest selling consumer electronics device, faster selling than anything Apple has ever done. They sold like 18 million of these in a 24-hour period or something ridiculous like that. You can look it up in the Guinness Book of World Records. Designed for the Xbox originally a couple years ago, this is a 3D RGB camera with depth sensor. It also has a multi-spectrum microphone, which allows it to uniquely listen to a single voice when a number of voices are speaking at it. But what me and some other folks have been doing for the last 2 years is begging these folks for an API in .NET and an interface so that we could build Windows applications for Kinect as opposed to Xbox games. And that's what this is. Just shipping a few short months ago, if not weeks ago, this is the Kinect for Windows. Plugs right into any Windows-based 7 computer system. One might speculate it'll be Windows 8 compatible when that thing gets shipping. And it's consumer priced. It's at retail, at list price, it's only $249. What the Kinect for Windows SDK does for you, an API, is simply give you X, Y, and Z coordinates in its most rudimentary fashion. It's up to you, the programmer, to deal with how you're going to react to what the user is doing. So why don't we jump in and do a neat little demo here that works in both touch and gesture and voice. So let me dive right in. Okay, this is the Actis Interactive Software digital signage solution, sometimes called the kiosk. Notice the Metro look and feel. We have columns separated out into demo apps, videos, and Actis. This interactive kiosk system can house digital content. It can house videos, like I will select the Actus video. This also responds to voice and gesture. So I could easily say Barbie, and it'll switch over to the Barbie video. I could say Nissan Pathfinder. Nissan Pathfinder. And it'll switch to the Nissan video. InterKnowlogy. In fact, anything you see on the screen is available for voice. So it will also do, we don't want to look at that guy, let me go home, or I could just say home. It'll also do static pictures in a scattered view or full screen type of way, or with navigation. There's me and Steve Ballmer at a keynote, and I'm a fly fisherman, so there's a trout. It can do HTML content. It can do raw data, like the way we do with the flight stats and the airplane feeds. A compelling part of this application is, as opposed to normal digital assets, though, is that it can actually spawn other applications. So this is a physical therapy demo app that we built that is Kinect enabled. Notice the difference between avatar navigation and cursor-based navigation. Right now my hand, my right hand as it were, is navigating the screen in a cursor type way with a lot more responsive as opposed to the avatar. We've also engineered things like, I'm left-handed, so I prefer to use my left hand, so I can navigate with my left hand. But this is based on a production app, just a demo version of a production Kinect app we built. This is not a doctor. This is, in fact, InterKnowlogy engineer Brian Kuhn, who has engineered a lot of our Kinect stuff. This would be avatar-based navigation. I have a rotator cuff injury. It wants me to do my right hand, and it wants me to do this exercise. And I've set it to 3 iterations. I must have done this. And this measures a gesture at 60,000 points. It also measures tempo. Right? So see, I did a little bit faster and got it through. So I've done 3. Here's the chart of my progress. Technically, in a home healthcare scenario, this could report back to my doctor and would give you like an end-to-end inexpensive home healthcare type application. So let me quit this application, and we'll go back to the Actus interactive software kiosk. You can license this kiosk software, by the way, from Actus. And in this, the content drives the experience. This could be any content in here. The content management system. So in a retail scenario, or this is running in a lot of hotels. It's running in the Microsoft Executive Briefing Center, and it all has custom content for those particular companies. But another demo app I wanted to show you is what we call Tor, or the InterKnowlogy touchless OR application. Notice the avatar-based navigation again. I can move right and I can move left. Notice how the digital assets follow me. I don't have a room here. I'm hitting the table over here and I'm running into a piece of furniture over here. The Kinect can natively track 2 people at a time. One might speculate that there might be a newer version of Kinect coming that might be able to track more. We could only hope. But in this case, in this use case, I'm a doctor. I mean, you could totally see a use case for retail. And that's my shopping basket following me around, and I'm physically in the store, and up on the wall is me. But this is a doctor, and I'm in some type of surgical procedure or otherwise, and I want to grab this patient's charts. I can also say them, 1, 2, 3, 4, but I chose gesture. I'm going to hover in. I love this particular zoom and panning gesture. I'm just with my hand. I hope you can see that. Here, I'll turn so that you can see that. Just with my hand, I accidentally with my left hand put out of there. Just with my left hand, I can pan in or out of one of these sample charts. I just love that. That is fantastic. Okay, but there's another way to navigate in this application, and it's a much more legitimate use case for an OR room, and that would be X-rays. I wish I had higher res digital images in here, but pretend we're on that use case of the rotator cuff. You can see an elbow here, or maybe you could tell that is someone's shoulder. So I can zoom in. I can say Tor 4, but I can also use gesture with my hands to zoom in on that shoulder, and I could keep zooming. And assuming this was a really high-res image, I could zoom right into the actual issue. Again, this one can be content managed too, so you can put any data in this one that you'd like. I think you'll argue that is pretty darn cool stuff. Let me go back to home, and I will navigate back to home in Tor, and then I will quit out of here, and it will release control back to the Actis interactive kiosk solution where I can, pick up video or some type of digital asset and such. Pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool stuff, huh? I just love the NUI thing. I love doing it with touch, and I certainly think the future is going to be paved in voice and gesture. Within a decade, I think we'll be talking about neural interfaces to computing systems. So, in the short time I've had today, I hope that I have portrayed that we're really right in the middle of this multi-touch NUI revolution and on the cusp of a complete NUI revolution that is dominated by, in some use cases, not all use cases, but in some use cases, by NUI and gesture and voice. We've seen, I think I've done a decent job in showing you, I've seen a number of use cases where touch actually enhances the user experience, and interacting with physical and virtual objects enhance the engagement. The great thing about this stuff is the hardware is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. You're going to get touch capability in every computing system from here on in, so it's your job to touch enable your applications in a way that make better engaging experiences, and the developer tools just keep getting better and better and better, and my buddy Julian from DevExpress is going to talk a little bit about that here in a second. And I believe it's safe to say that within just a few short years, we could certainly argue that multi-touch is prevalent right now simply because of the iPad, but across the board, in just a few short months, we'll be able to argue that touch as a part of the natural user face will be the norm. So if you're interested in any of this stuff, feel free to send me an email. My email address is in the top right hand corner. Feel free to contact me. There's all my social networking type stuff. In a few seconds here, my buddy Julian is going to take over and tell you about the tools. I assume he's going to take over and tell you about the tools that'll help you build these NUI-based applications based in touch.
Hello, my name is Julian Bucknall, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer for DevExpress. First of all, let me thank Tim Huckaby for his wide-ranging overview of the natural user interface, using touch and gestures and other immediate human-centric signals to use our computers better and more easily than we have ever done before. And that's coming from someone who used DOS and can remember his first mouse. Now, of course, even with such capabilities being present in the peripherals we use with our computers, we still have a way to go. It's not game over just yet. For us developers in particular, the issue is no longer how do we indicate to our computers what we want to do in a natural manner, a point here, a swipe there, a pinch everywhere, but how do we design a complete user interface to A, display the data you need to see in a manner that imparts information immediately, and B, allow you to manipulate that display using those natural interactions. We are at the start of a touch revolution. Way back when Microsoft introduced Windows XP Tablet PC Edition, I bought a Toshiba convertible. Sorry, that's the wrong image. A Toshiba convertible tablet, the Portage M200. Although you could use your finger, It was meant to be used with a stylus. And since a fingertip is bigger than a mouse cursor, or the point of a stylus, the Tosh, bless its heart, was not really a touch device, as was evinced by the use of the standard Windows apps and their small buttons and small target areas. In fact, it was a rare occasion I converted it, to be honest. It was just a glorified tablet for me. The iPad, which I would argue was the first real general-purpose device that supported touch, changed the game. For a start, it was not a single touch device like my old Tosh. It supported 2 or more simultaneous touch events. You could swipe, and the operating system understood that gesture is turning a page, for example. You could pinch or widen your fingers, and the gesture was associated with zooming. You had big targets to press, those big icons. No longer these tiny 16 by 16 pixel icons. A whole user interface metaphor came along for the ride and enforced by Apple in the approval process for the App Store. You follow the rules, and all iPad users should be able to manipulate your app. Android tablets followed along using the same gesture metaphors, and now we have Windows 8 and Metro on the near horizon, with presumably a raft of third-party devices ready to take advantage of them. The world was, is, and will be your oyster. Except, how do you take advantage of this brave, newish world? The first point to make, I think, is to leverage the controls that are available for the touch platform you are targeting. If you're writing iOS apps, for example, there's a bunch that come with Xcode and Interface Builder. If you're going to write web apps or HTML5, CSS, JavaScript apps, you'll easily find a collection of sets of mobile controls, some open source and relatively free, some commercial and paid for. Similarly, for the new Metro apps, there are controls that come with VS 11, and some you can already purchase. My point is, there's no need to reinvent the wheel control-wise. You have a plethora of choice. Obviously, seeing that I am CTO of a rather successful control vendor, I would naturally enjoin you to check out our offerings in this space, both for ASP.NET and MVC, and for WinForms, WPF, and Silverlight, platforms that you may not envision as being particularly touch-capable. And of course, stay tuned for more news about our Metro controls, and so on. Having just said that, it's at this point that I shall channel Steve Ballmer and chant, designers, designers, designers. It seems to me that with this new paradigm, you'd better avail yourself of some user interface designers' ideas and experience. Despite the various betas of Visual Studio 11 that we've seen, it is no longer a grey world user interface-wise. People expect, even though they may not be able to articulate it as such, a well-designed interface. It must exhibit well-thought-out contrast and color. Data must be visually distinct, that is, have a higher contrast. From the plumbing of the interface, the borders, the lines, the headers, the footers. In this new touch world, clutter is gone. After all, you may touch it by mistake. White space is paramount, even though it may not be white. And black polo necks are de rigueur. I hear you. You put out some well-regarded applications in your career without any need for a black polo neck, but what's changed? Well, to be blunt, your competition has, even though you may not recognize them as competitors. They've availed themselves of designers for their tablet apps, and now your end users are used to that kind of design. Again, at the cost of repeating myself, even if they can't articulate exactly why. Here, for example, We have in the upper left corner, we have Quicken, used by numerous people. And in the right corner, we have, of course, Mint.com, who Intuit have actually purchased. Two different ways of looking at your finances. If you don't want to hire a designer, or you can't afford to, or the business won't allow it, what can you do? First of all, I'd say, is teach yourself. Look around you at the user interfaces you use every day. Your email program, your Twitter client, Facebook, Visual Studio, including the Visual Studio 11 beta, your finance and banking apps like this. Or how about this, to be right up to date? The user interface changes at Bitly. Observe their use of fonts, colors, white space, icons, images, workflows, etc., etc., etc. And like the majority of people, articulate to yourself what you like about those interfaces, what you don't like. Even better, watch someone else use them. Are they using those apps in a totally different way than you? Can you learn from their use? And could they possibly learn from you? My idea here is to allow yourself to be inspired by what others have done. I would argue that the primary inspiration for the user interface of your apps should be of existing applications. And in the tablet space, that goes double. I guess by using some spurious internet statistics that 89.4% of desktop business applications have imitated Outlook in its various incarnations. Not as an email program, you understand, but in its use of a menu, a toolbar, a navigation panel, grid, status bar, etc. Of course, some of our own WinForms controls at DevExpress have been inspired by Outlook. Another source of design inspiration, I find, is well-designed websites and web applications. These are possibly the best source of inspiration for me in my non-DevExpress work. Say, messing around with my personal blog. I see something cool or neat at some website and I long to learn from it and replicate it myself. A big source of inspiration is the full-featured demos we put out as part of our products. Here, it's even easier to be inspired. You not only get the demo application itself, you get the full source code, the images, the icons, and our developer license allows you to take the demo and fix it so that it solves your business problem. So as an example, here's our real-to-world demo. As you see, it's a modern tile application. The tiles being either static, like this one, this one, this one, or active. They're updating themselves. You can already get some kind of update information from this kind of a dashboard type look. Touching a tile navigates you to a further page to display more information. In a traditional sense, you could say you're drilling down to get more data. Notice the objects that are touchable are big, fingertip size. It's easy to hit these targets. There are charts which can scroll, images in easy swipeable lists. The thing is, you don't have to look at this app and say, I wish my app looked like that. It's a demo with a product. Rip out our data source and plug in your own and make your app look like this. We've paid our designers to think about the hard stuff so that you can be inspired and imitate what we have. Of course, it almost goes without saying that our real-to-world app was inspired by the Metro look and feel, which in turn was inspired by Swiss-style graphic design, and which in turn owes much to the Bauhaus movement in the 1920s and 30s. And that, I think, is the best way to think about user interface design in a touch world. Either hire a designer or look at what other people have done and be inspired by that. It's new, but not necessarily scary. And go build some impressive touch-centric applications. And now, let's go to a Q&A.